Hi, this is Tiffany Travels, where we help families create a life of ease through travel and wealth creation. So, on my channel, you'll find travel blogs as well as videos for financial independence, and lately, videos for creating a life of ease. And in order to create a life of ease, your health has to be at the forefront of your agenda, of your priorities. So today's guest is going to talk to us about nutrition and health. So I'm going to bring her on now. Hi,
Hi.
how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. It's a lovely day today in New York City, so I'm happy to be here with you.
Amazing. So you can start by telling us about yourself, about your channel, and about the content that people can find there, and yeah, basically what you do.
Sure. Well, hi, I'm Lindsay, and my channel is called The Plant Plan. I help folks eat well for their health goals. May that be fitness goals, right? Or general health, longevity, and well-being. I'm also a health coach, so I promote healthy lifestyle changes, healthy habits, so that folks can live their best lives, especially for women and especially Black women as we age. We really want to be focused on a lot of these things on ourselves and making sure that our well-being is intact so that we can live long and prosper.
Yes. Okay. We have a few people joining us. We have my mom says good morning.
Good morning.
We have C. Wilson. Hello. And she's listening. And we have a few other people here. So feel free to say hey. So, how did you get started in this work?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long journey for me. I grew up obese and also there's a lot of chronic disease in my family. So that's, all versions of cardiovascular disease like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, stroke, cardiac arrest, all of those things. And then also we have, honestly, most of the elders of my family are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Obesity runs in the family as well. So, I kind of grew up in, this environment. And as I was growing older into my young adulthood, kind of seeing all my elders have a hard time at a time where they should be resting, right? Where they should be able to, go on trips and enjoy their life, but they were in so much pain or they were on medication and all of this sorts of stuff. And I knew that it would be me next if I didn't take care of myself. I knew that it would be, I knew that it would be hard to change others without changing myself. Um, because I mean, I don't know, like most Black women, I think we're kind of raised to care for others more than ourselves. And so, even though I was in the state that I was in, I just wanted them to change. I wanted them to have a good life and to enjoy their life and to be able to climb a set of stairs and not be winded and to not have all these medications and stuff that they had to take. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, I am clearly predisposed to all these conditions, and my lifestyle is supporting that, and it's sending me there fast. So let me change myself. And so I lost 80 pounds. I gained a lot of muscle in the process, and I saw my health markers improve like drastically. And to this day, I get a clean bill of health every time I go to the doctor, thankfully. Um, and and yeah, and so I realized, wait, it doesn't have to be restrictive dieting. It doesn't have to be extreme measures. It doesn't have to be all of this crazy stuff that you see on the news all the time. It can be simple long-term changes and healthy habits that improve over time that can really move the needle. And I want to share that with other people. So that's why, or partly why I started my channel. And that's why I started health coaching this year.
Nice. So we have Beverly who joined as well. Hey. So you said you mentioned you had this family history of diabetes and other health conditions. So I'm wondering how much of that is genetic and how much of that is diet. Because I went to the doctor recently, and we were discussing my health. And he was like, "Do you know why I have fibroids?" He's like, "Do you know why you have fibroids?" And I said, "Yeah, it's genetic. Women in my family have fibroids." And he's like, yes, it's genetic, but it's also your diet. Like Black women have, he was making all kind of stereotypes, a particular diet, which would then influence their health. And he was trying to say, like, usually people in the family have the same diet. So it's
Mm.
not that it's genetic, but it's more so that you have family members that are eating the same diet. And so they have the same chronic disease. So how much of that is true versus it's genetic?
Yeah, it's that and the like it's both. They work in conjunction. So the phrase that I like to use that you'll hear often that I wish we had a better way of saying this, but they say that life no that genetics loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? So it's basically you can be predisposed to something and your lifestyle can help send you to a diagnosis that you may be predisposed to, right? Um, that being said, I mean, there's a threshold for everything, really. What I mean by that is that, even if you might not be predisposed to something, there's still potential for you to get that, right? If your lifestyle is really driving you towards that. But I think there is some validity in what the doctor was saying. He probably could have said it, more tactfully. Probably like, oh, Black woman, this and that, like, calm down. But there is truth in that. There definitely is truth in that.
Okay. So we have Taylor V that joined us too. And Beverly says it's admirable the way you turned your health around.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think this is kind of an amazing thing about us Black women is that when we find a way out of something or when we achieve something, we're like, I gotta help everybody do this. I gotta, who else? Come on, let's all get on the boat, right? Let's all get on the raft. So um we would not be Rose and push push that man off the raft, we would try to bring him on. And so that's a lot of what I'm doing here, is being like, oh, I found something that works. Let me try to make sure that everyone else can at least have these tools that I'm using to improve their life. So yeah.
So, how important is fasting to one's health and one's diet? Because I've read research that says that the human body, the way that, ancestrally, that we weren't designed to have access to food all the time. So, we would have food whenever there was a kill or there was a hunt. And then we'd have periods where we didn't have food, like in the wild, in nature. Lions have food sometimes, and sometimes they don't. So the fasting process can mimic the way our bodies were designed to process food and also to eliminate toxins that are in our packaged food today. But how important is that? Is that something that you recommend people do a couple of times a year? Or is it creating more of a yo-yo effect, do you think?
Yeah. Yes to all of those things in a way, right? So your initial question was, how important is fasting to health? Not at all. You don't have to fast. And actually fasting is kind of this huge umbrella category. And I think most of the time we're talking about time restricted feeding or time restricted eating. It's often called, and it's basically a way of saying, okay, I'm going to eat between these hours and not eat between these hours. And there's a couple of things here and a couple of things in what you just said that I want to address. And the first thing is that I with anything, especially when it comes to you making decisions on how to change your diet or your life or whatever, um, we want to be careful when we're accepting in new information, right? I mean, obviously, you want to kind of vet things, and exactly as you did, you want to look at research and things like that. But you also want to make sure that you're looking at the right research, that you're looking at the totality of evidence, what the totality of evidence is saying, because we can lean into things very easily, lean into things like, uh, the naturalistic fallacy, right? Which says, oh, well, we were designed for this. And, this, we have this fantasy of like our natural state and how we did it back in the day. Like, yeah, well, we also died at 30 back in the day. And like, we, we had like wild, diseases that we've pretty much eradicated, with our lifestyles and medication and treatment and stuff like that now. So we don't want to rely too much and say, oh, back in the day we did this, therefore that's the right way and how we should eat. The other thing is too, is that, you see it all the time. This study says something is bad. This study says something is good. And for the most part, it all depends, right? It all depends on, um, different individual characteristics, how, where you are, your lifestyle, what you have access to, what you don't, your personal history and things like that. So when it comes to like public health recommendation, what we can recommend for everyone, I would say we need to take a step back and look at what the totality of evidence is saying and what is supported by most studies. So a good thing to do is, as you're researching, look for meta-analyses instead of single studies or articles about specific things. Because the article, like I said, it'd be eggs are great, eggs are bad, eggs are, it'll kill you, like all of this sort of stuff. And you get confused, and now you're not doing anything at all to change. Whereas if you look at, for example, a meta-analysis or a report on a meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is basically a study of a whole bunch of studies, right? So what do all of the studies on this subject say? What are the nuances here, right? Is it for this population, that population, da 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 da? And then you could get a better idea that way. It's a little bit of work. You
Mhm.
might find some really good sources that can explain this to the public in like layman's terms. But I would just say, like, I know I'm not answering your question actually, but I want to lay the baseline of like everything that I'm gonna say, right? That we can pull back and say, for most people, it's not necessary. There are a lot of purported benefits that they're like, it's gonna do this kind of magic and stuff. It may work for one person, it may not work for another person because of all the variables that I was talking about. So if it's something that you are naturally inclined to do, like you always skipped breakfast, I would try eating breakfast. But if it's just naturally like what you've always done, cool, that works for you. And it happens to be time restricted eating or intermittent fasting and, things like that. That's totally fine. Um, as long as you are getting all of the nutrients that you need and all of the calories, right, all of the energy that you need to do your daily activity and keep your mind right and all of that, it doesn't matter too much exactly what time of day or how far from your bedtime or your breakfast it is. It may have little effects like, like you might feel a little bit of indigestion, right? If you eat really early, like right out of bed, roll out of bed onto the kitchen table type of thing, and if you eat like a high volume, so there's little things like that, like behavioral things, but there's nothing to say that these are the magic times that you should eat, for reasons of nature and this and that. Um, these are things that, like, stories that make sense to us, right? Because we can kind of see how it makes sense. But for the most part, I wouldn't make massive changes to your life and your lifestyle based off of that.
Okay.
And the last thing I'd mention on this is that, it, it can be a tool in the toolbox if you are working towards a goal. For example, if you are trying to lose weight, right, you're trying to do some weight management, it can be one of the tools that you use, because if you're restricting the amount of time that you're eating, you are probably restricting the amount of calories. that you're getting in, right? Because you're not eating for X amount of time during the day that you might otherwise eat. You're going to displace those calories a little bit within those windows, but it could be a tool that helps you eat less, right? It's but even then, it's the amount of calories you're eating and not when you're eating those calories that is doing the thing that you want. So
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. So it could be a tool for weight loss management, but for ongoing health and nutrition, it's not necessary.
it's not necessary. It's not, I mean, if it works for you, like, again, all of these studies are studying all different types of people. And so that's why you might have one study that says, okay, most of the people that we studied for this in this method, it worked for them. And then another one to say, nope, it didn't work for them. So you could be the individual that defies the norms. That's totally fine. Um, but for most people, it's not necessary. And it kind of might lead to different behaviors that are just not really what we're trying to achieve.
Okay. And then yeah, I could see that like somebody's fasting, but then the hours that they are eating, they're eating like burgers and fries during those. So then it would be counterproductive, even though they are fasting.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There's no magic beyond just the fact that it's restricting the amount of time that you have to eat. Yeah, so totally. I mean, the other thing is too, I should have mentioned this, is that um sometimes they're using it for people with digestive issues, like serious, like IBS type of stuff, because what it does is that it reduces the time that your intestines are digesting, right? So it can reduce the inflammation in the gut, because the inflammation is like part of the digestive process, and so it can like give it some time to calm down a little bit. But if you're not someone who is prescribed that method of eating by your doctor to relieve some of those symptoms, I mean, try it for sure. Like I'm a advocate of, like, if it's not going to be super harmful, definitely try it. But for most people, and especially for folks with a history of disordered eating, please stay away from it. Like, don't bother with it.
Okay, so Taylor V talks about they say we should not have three meals a day. So I've heard that eating smaller meals more often, like a 7 a.m., a 10 a.m., a 12, a 2. So basically three meals with two snacks in between. So five times a day is better for metabolism because your body is always burning food, or it gets used to always burning food. So then your metabolism increases. I've heard that. And then I've also
Mhm.
heard that if you're eating multiple meals, that you're not going to overeat at one meal. So you'll be less hungry because you're constantly eating, and you won't overeat, and you typically make better decisions that way. Is that
You're about
true?
to be really frustrated with me because I'm going to keep saying the phrase, it depends. I'm so sorry. I apologize in advance. I'm so sorry. But again, the it depends on the individual. I would say again, that's not necessary if you're not already naturally inclined to that. It's not a necessary change, and it's not really going to move the needle. Like, if you're trying to make a change like that to lose weight, um, I would probably consider something else beforehand. Because what could happen, what often happens, I've seen it, is that people say, okay, I'm going to increase my metabolism and decrease the amount of calories that I eat by eating smaller meals throughout the day. And the math will math out, everything's great. But then you eat that small meal, and now you're frustrated because you're not full, and you have to wait X amount of time before your next meal. And then you're frustrated again at that meal because you're not eating enough. I mean, for me, I'm a snacker, and I like having like a good volume of food in my meal. I know that myself, I would get so frustrated, and I'd be like, well, screw that. I'm gonna eat meal two right now. Like, I'll
Mhm.
just eat them both. And then I'll get to meal three. And then meal three turns into meal three and four. And then now you're frustrated and you're da da da, then you might snack again, so it depends on you. If that's something that you want to try, go ahead, but it's another one of those things that the more you're trying to drastically change your habits, the more it might lead to a yo-yo effect, the more it might lead to you feeling frustrated because you're anytime you make a goal up here and you need this amount of effort to achieve it and you end up down here, instead of realizing that you've jumped here, which is great, like, hey, you got closer to your goal, what you're only seeing is this gap. Like, oh, I wasn't able to do it. And now your confidence dips, and the next attempt that you have at dieting for any type of goal, you just have less and less confidence over time, and you feel like you keep failing and you don't believe in yourself, you can't achieve your goals, all of this sort of stuff. So don't get into that mental space. If it's going to be a drastic change, consider something a little bit less. Yeah. But technically speaking, it doesn't really increase your metabolism over time. It may it eating by itself increases your metabolism because you're metabolizing what you just ate. So eating more often in the day, okay, yes, acutely your metabolism is increasing because you got to process that multiple times a day, but it's not something that is increasing your metabolism over time in the sense of you're getting more uh, uh, you're increasing your insulin sensitivity and like all like it's not doing all of this other stuff, right? So um yeah, the juice is not worth the squeeze on that one. So
Okay, so back to Taylor B's question about the not having 3 meals a day. I've also
mhm,
heard not to eat late at night, like a heavy meal late at night, because then the energy that's in that food is not used because you're going to go do something dormant, you're going to sleep. So I've heard eat your heavier meals earlier in the day, even breakfast being a heavier meal or lunch being a heavier meal, and then you'll be able to use the energy throughout the day. And then there's different cultures where lunch is the biggest meal. Like they eat really heavy midday, 12, 2, and then they have a lighter dinner ish. And then there are cultures that eat really late, like France, they eat dinner even up to
mhm,
10 p.m. There, it's normal. It's not like an off chance one time they're eating at 10 p.m. It's normal. I think it has to do with the sun. The sun is out super late in France. Like it doesn't set until past 10 in the summer. But anyway, they eat, they're social, so they're out 8, 9, 10 eating. So it's like, okay, and they're thin. The French
yeah.
are pretty thin. They eat late, and then it's like, okay, so is it that we shouldn't eat late, or is it that maybe the Americans shouldn't eat late because of of the American lifestyle? Maybe that's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, again, it depends. It depends on how your lifestyle is set up, and you brought up some really good points here. The thing is, it makes sense to eat when you're most active, right? Sure. However, your bodies are smarter than you are, right? I don't mean you, I mean just you, the general royal you, um, that our bodies know what they're designed for taking in energy and using it as efficiently as it can, right? If we allow it to. I'm saying that because this whole like don't eat, after 7 or 8 or whatever magic number we come up with this month, right? Don't eat at this time and stuff. If it's going to mess up your like some people eat really big, heavy meals. If you're doing that right before bed, it might make you feel uncomfortable. What it's not doing is like when you go to bed, your body isn't stopping everything and saying, well, we can't use this, so we'll just store it as fat and da da da. Da. Your body can store things for later use, right? It's a very smart and efficient machine um, that knows what it's doing. So I wouldn't feel like you have to stop eating at a certain time. If you're going to go to bed hungry, it may affect the quality of sleep that you have, right? So, I mean, you might not want to eat right before bed, like I was saying before, but there's no reason other than like maybe your own curiosity. Okay, let me see how I feel. It's always great to test out different things and see if it works for you, but I wouldn't say across the board that no one should be eating at this time. And you brought up the greatest examples that there's some cultures that eat super late at night and have a really late breakfast, if at all. There's some cultures that eat a huge breakfast and then little, kind of graze throughout the rest of the day and go to bed really early, perhaps. And then there's some cultures that have a huge lunch, right? And like a moderate breakfast and, maybe a big meal at night, but not too close to bed. So, but you'll also probably see that for the most part in those cultures, okay, most of their activity is during the day and they're doing a lot of, gardening, agricultural kind of work or manual labor and things like that. Okay, that's where their big meal happens to be. Or, okay, they're doing more, they're in an office all day and they don't, work very far from their home. And then they come home and that's where all of their social activity and dancing and hanging out and walking around town is. Okay, and now they're eating a big meal at night. You know what I mean? So it usually follows what part of the day they're most active. But I'm not going to make a recommendation, and I don't think most public health officials would make a recommendation that everyone should be not eating at a certain time. Yeah.
Okay. Beverly says, I would guess that what we eat here in the US is different than what is eaten in France, Europe, which makes a difference. So, yeah, they're eating later at night, but it's cleaner foods because even in the restaurant, like a regular restaurant, is serving you the duck confit, and it's just cleaner than our burgers and fries here. So that could be it too.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about weight, again, it's the calories. I know it's like not a fun thing to talk about calories and stuff like that, but really it's the amount of energy that's in the food and how dense in energy the food is. So I think there probably is something to that, right? That it's the food that they're eating is probably less processed, right? Or probably they have like less ultra processed foods in their diet for sure. And that's probably doing a lot. But if we equate them for calories, there's something else going on there where they are less obese as a population than us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing on culture is we hear in America that you shouldn't eat carbs or you should limit processed carbs like white carbs, white rice, white bread, white pasta, um, white potatoes. And then there are cultures that eat white rice like all day, every day, every meal. Like in Asian culture, there's no shortage of white rice. They eat white rice all the time, and they don't have issues with obesity or diabetes that I know of. So how is I mean, is it a different rice that's over there? How is it that they're eating? Is it a different rice
Yeah.
grain? What's going
It's,
on with the rice in Asia? Do we
yeah,
can we only
there's no
eat basmati rice? What's the deal?
listen, if your body doesn't have a process with insulin and getting the stuff to where it needs to go ahead and eat your rice. Like I, I mean, yeah, carbohydrates are a staple in most cultures, right? Africans have yams, cassava, sweet potato, all those sorts of things. Um, there's rice, there's all the different grains that the kind of ancient grains that they have good PR. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Actually, this is a huge thing that I want to say is that there's nothing inherently wrong with any ingredient. It's our dietary patterns that have the most influence over things. So there's no like, you know, one quick fix food or one demon food, that is really the problem here. And likewise for micronutrients, right? Like there's some people who are like carbs are the devil. There's other people, believe it or not, there's other people that are like, protein is the problem. A high amount of protein in your diet is a problem. There's a lot of people, especially like in the 80s, 90s, fat was the kind of demon micronutrient and stuff like that. So the thing about macronutrients, excuse me, the thing about macronutrients is that they're macro for a reason. We need them all. Um, and they're all very important. They all have important functions in our bodies, and um, extreme diets that uh, take out one of those macronutrients, um, it might help someone lose weight, right? Because you're just eating less, right? Again, calories are king in this sense. Um, it might help you lose weight, but for long-term health, you want to have adequate amounts. It doesn't need to be super high amounts of certain things, but you want to have adequate amounts. Now, if we're talking about how there are some cultures that have a lot of carbohydrates in their diet, in like good amounts. Okay, so let's compare them to us in the United States. There are cultures like in Africa or Northern Europe that rely on tubers, right? Like potatoes and yams, cassava, taro, all those sorts in Asia as well, taro and all of those things, right? And then you have, the cultures that rely on pasta, and then there's rice, and then all of this sort of stuff. Here, think about how we consume potatoes most. Fried, butter, oil all over it, right? So it's not just the potato, it's all of this added calories on it, right? Again, fat is not bad. We need fat, right? But it's very calorically dense. And when you have a lot of it on top of a lot of carbohydrates, on top of, you know, uh, I mean, well, most people should probably be eating more protein, but like if your overall calorie consumption is high, and you're just like piling on more calorie dense foods and you're only eating calorie dense foods, right? Like think about a typical lunch where you have a hamburger, which is processed meat that's high in saturated fat. Then you have cheese on top of that, high in saturated fat, right? And high in calories. You have, you know, ultra processed white bun on that. Okay, you might sprinkle a little bit of onions, that are probably fried in butter, right? And then maybe a tomato. Okay, good for you. Wow, you have your veggies in there. A leaf of iceberg lettuce that's basically water, right? Although I stand iceberg lettuce, it's great, but it's basically water. And then you have a heap, not even like a decent portion, but a heap of fried potatoes that have been processed almost beyond recognition. There's nothing in there that's kind of balancing it out so that you have a portion that has a high energy density and then the rest of it is less, right? So, and if that's every meal, right, you just came from breakfast with 3 eggs, bacon, fried in butter, bread, all this sort of stuff, and low quality bread at that. And then you go to dinner where it's like heaps of rice maybe, or more potatoes, and then your small portion of protein, again fried. It piles up, right? So not all of those foods that I listed, there's not one of them that is a bad food. You can eat it, you can have it, but if that's every meal every day, now you're having a buildup of just overnutrition, basically too much. And so now your body, especially if you're sedentary or not being active, you're not using these calories that you're eating, and you're not resistance training and things like that. Okay, now your body is just storing it, right? It's like, well, we could probably use this someday, like hold it for later, hold it for later. And then now you're getting more and more adipose tissue, right? More and more fat, more and more fat. And so that's really the problem. It's not the meat, those specific food items. It's the entirety of our diet being based off of those things and then added calories.
Okay, so my mom says she agrees with Beverly. I think it has a lot to do with cultures. She's taking a trip to Japan and she's doing a lot of research, and there's rice everywhere. And the
Mhm.
rice is even on the breakfast menu. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
When you look at
so
rice itself, it's a great food. It's a great grain, right? Uh especially if you, I mean, white rice is one thing, but if you have whole grain rice, you have all of the fiber that it comes encased in. It's a good dense source of carbohydrate. It's a great energy source, right? So especially if you're someone who is active, um, yeah, that's a great energy source. So
So all of these diets that I hear, like the paleo diet, the Atkins diet, the I heard the keto diet, they all sound like the same thing to me. They all sound like you just eat like you don't have access to a grocery store. Like you eat like you're a farmer, right? Like it's like a Whole Foods. You just eat the vegetables, the fruits, the bread, but like if they're the most natural, like whole wheat, whole grain, the rice if it's whole grain, they all sound the same. I can't even tell. Is it
yeah,
like the base of it is just cleaner eating, less
yeah,
packed?
most of yeah, they're all some version of a similar, I mean, there are nuances between them. But for example, keto, Atkins, kind of the caveman diet type of thing, like these are all just rebranded over time. Like you'll see every 10, 20 years, it's same thing, different name. But then there's some that are even more extreme, right? Like the carnivore diet where you're only eating animal products. And then there's another one that you paleo, right? Paleo, so it's really just unprocessed plant foods that you're having, but you're relying more on, I mean, the whole thing is to have like least processed as possible. And then there are some nuances like, no, you don't eat, you know, potatoes or something like there's a little bit of, this, not that kind of going on there, which is fine. And they all have their own like ideologies as to why, this food is bad or that food is not so great or whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, if it works for you, it's fine. But the major takeaway from all of those different ones is that it's reducing the amount of processed food that you're eating in your diet over time. And most of the benefits that they're talking about is related to that and not that these foods are magic and do something, right? It's that it's reducing or eliminating the amount of processed foods in your diet. Now, that being said, I should probably define processed foods. I think a lot of times people throw around the word processed foods and we're not even talking about what that means. And actually, there's a tier, right? So there's so many foods that are processed that we wouldn't consider processed foods. Um, so there's unprocessed foods, which is like, directly from the tree, or if you are a hunter, you go out and shoot a deer or something like that, and you go home and you eat that, right? So that's unprocessed, like nothing has been done in the processing, like to get it from where it came from to you, unprocessed. Then you have minimally processed foods, so they did a little bit of something to it. And then you have processed foods, and then you have ultra processed foods. So the thing that we're trying to limit in our diets to improve our diets is the ultra processed foods, right? And you can have processed foods, you can have minimally processed foods. Those are typically fine to eat in whatever amount. Um, but just based off of like your own personal preferences and digestion and things like that, and your overall diet, right? You don't want that to displace all of the unprocessed foods, but you want to rely on the bottom tiers of those things, unprocessed and minimally processed foods, and then try to crowd out all the super processed foods. But yeah, they're all pretty similar. They're kind of rebranded, but the majority of the benefits of those things is because it relies on the lower tier of unprocessed and minimally processed foods.
Okay. And then processed foods are is that like chips and crackers and
Yeah,
pretzels?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Got it. And then I was in Europe for a few weeks and I was so tired. And then I came back and I got results from, so before that, my mom wants to know examples of ultra processed foods.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultra processed foods are going to be your processed meats, um, like um, like sausages, most bacon, right? So bacon has they cure it with salt and sometimes they put nitrites in it and things like that. Either to preserve its color or to kind of help in the to keep it, fresher for longer, right? Because it's, being sent from wherever the pig, all of that sort of stuff, right? So those would be, like hamburgers, hot dogs, and then also, some of the things that you would classify as junk foods, right? If it came in a package that was sitting on the shelf for a long time, it's typically something that is ultra processed foods. The other thing I would say about ultra processed foods is that they typically have very little fiber or no fiber, or it's been added to it, right? Which is fine, but you don't want to be relying on all of that sort of stuff, especially for things like fiber and whatever other health claims that are on the label, right? It's stuff that's been put on there. I'm not demonizing these foods. I'm just saying you have better options for all of that sort of stuff. So if you want to include those in your diet, whatever, that's fine. But you want to probably have less. Soda is a huge one. That's obviously ultra processed. And then some minimally processed foods would be things like sorry, deli meats is also another one that I would say is ultra processed or somewhere between processed and ultra processed.
What about
And
cereal?
cereal, yeah, cereals would be processed. Yeah, cereals are processed. But this is what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't mean that it's unhealthy and you should never eat it, right? So there's some cereals that are really great and nutritious and wholesome, but I mean, it's not falling from a tree, you know, or like you don't pick cereal, right? You have to make it. And so it is considered processed, but it's not necessarily harmful in itself, right? If you're eating cereal and it's that level of processing that is all of your food, all of the calories that you're taking in the day, then it becomes an issue and you might want to replace it. But if you have an otherwise wholesome diet and you're adding cereal, what's the problem? Especially if it's like a great cereal, like a Fiber One type of thing, or any of those what's that brand? Cascadian Farms. You can tell a wholesome cereal versus like,
Lucky Charms.
yeah, Lucky Charms, right? Cookie Crisps, like some of these are not, the best. Those might be considered as like a snack food.
My mom wants to know if the sausage patties for breakfast are considered ultra processed.
Yes, yes. Yeah, those are ultra processed. Yeah. Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know.
And another example would be uh like sourdough bread
Mhm.
versus Wonder Bread, right?
Okay.
So a lot of people like bread is bad, bread is evil, but it's like, if you're getting a wholesome, like a baker made it, right, type of thing versus it was completely done in a machine that was like measuring everything and like, it's really refined wheat. the quality is just different. So,
Okay, she's crying about the sausages.
to what?
She's crying about the sausages.
I'm so sorry. Just eat less of them, maybe, or try to have. Again, I'm not telling you to get rid of all of your favorite foods, right? That should not be the message that you receive from this. But instead of it being, uh, Sunday through Saturday, you can make that, let's start off Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, or whatever 2 days, you want, make that an oatmeal, right? Or the same dish without those sausages, right? Maybe try, a meat that's a little bit less processed.
Okay. So yeah, I was saying I was in Paris for the summer and I was so fatigued, which is why I started talking about ease and health because it was affecting my travel. So I was like, okay, now I got to talk about this on my travel channel. And so, what should people eat for fatigue? Because I thought that as people age, a part of aging, just a natural part of aging, is getting tired. Like they talk about having more naps. Like, if you're older, it's more normal to have a nap in the day. So I just thought this was being a mom, traveling, getting older, all those things. But maybe now I'm thinking my food, my diet could be the reason why I'm fatigued.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So if you are fatigued, like tired is one thing, fatigued is a whole other thing. Especially if it's something that persists and it's not just, okay, I was tired today type of thing, right? So speak with your doctor because it could be an issue of, um, it could be multiple things, right? It could be, like a disease state that you might be developing or you might be in. It could be an infection, like it could be so many different things. It could also be, a big one with women is iron. Um, so you definitely want to have that checked out. Another big one is B vitamins, right? So if you're not eating a very diverse diet, um, you might be lacking, or if you're not supplementing, for example, you might be lacking in B vitamins. And B vitamins basically help you metabolize the it helps you metabolize your micronutrients. This is like super oversimplification, but you want to make sure that you're having your B vitamins so that you can basically get the energy from the food that you're eating, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and they do a bunch of other stuff too, right? But it's important there. I would recommend that. And then also, if you're not eating enough calories, right? So there's people who are chronically dieting or chronically like eating less, um, which has its benefits depending on what your health and fitness goals are. But sometimes people do it without knowing. And, especially if you start off like you see this often with folks who are immediately jumping into a low carb diet and go really low carbs. Your body is adapted to using carbohydrates for everything, right? And I mean, everything gets changed into glucose, and that's what your body runs on. That's what your brain runs on, right? So if you immediately just dip into like, oh, no, no carbs, this is what some health guru online told me to do, then, without kind of a transition period or testing it out first to see how you feel, that kind of thing, it could lead to feeling really low energy, and stuff. So I would recommend people checking those things. I think those are probably the main ones, right? Your diversity of your diet, making sure that you're getting all of your micronutrients, especially B vitamins, iron, right? Also the iron absorption changes as we age. B12, for example, B12 is another one that changes as we age. B12 is really important for folks who are on plant-based diets, like completely, plant-based diets. So my vegans and vegetarians, and then also older individuals, right? The interesting thing about B12 is that it's not actually from animal foods. It's like a bacteria that's in the soil. And because we've kind of over sanitized our food, we're not getting that in our diet as much. But with animal-based foods, they supplement the animal feed with B12 and a bunch of other stuff. And so when you're eating animal foods, you're also getting that, right? So you tend to not have a problem with B12. But as we get older, our appetites change, how we're absorbing the nutrients in our foods change. So you definitely want to be on B12. And then also, if you're not eating any animal products at all, like myself, then you want to make sure that you're supplementing with that, because yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where, over time now you don't have enough B12 and you have all these other issues. So,
Okay. Yeah, I my blood work came back for anemia, and my doctor told me I have half the blood that I should have. So I don't even know how that's possible, but
wow.
that was my blood results. So he told me to take
Yeah.
liquid iron, which tastes horrible. It tastes horrible.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what else to take for that, like dark leafy greens, kale, spinach.
Yeah, yeah. So with low iron, yeah, you definitely want to be supplementing, right? If it's at that stage. I'm so glad you caught that. I mean, it would be hard not to if you're really fatigued and all of that, but I'm glad you actually went to your doctor and got that sorted out. Definitely be taking the iron supplementation. I would also recommend high iron foods like the ones that you mentioned. Leafy greens, dark leafy greens are the best. You also want to be pairing that with vitamin C. So vitamin C helps you absorb the iron in your food. Um, and yeah, so definitely do that. I would make sure to not pair it with caffeine, or have it like a little bit away from when you're drinking any like tea or coffee or anything like that. Um, and I think also calcium is another one that kind of inhibits the absorption a little bit. Um, not, I mean, obviously you need calcium, right? But when you're taking your iron, kind of have it away from those things, just to make sure that you're absorbing as much of the iron as you can. Um, and yeah, just monitor, go from there.
Okay. And then what do you think about the US having ingredients that are banned in certain countries? Like even candy, like gummy bears, even candy in Europe, there's no blue number five, there's no red, there's no yellow, this one. They use, like I read the ingredients, they use fruits to get the color. So it's like if they want that black or purple color, they use like a black currant or a raspberry, or even sometimes vegetables. So they use like a squash or a sweet potato to get a certain color. They're not adding food coloring. And it's just
Mhm.
so many ingredients that are in our food here that are just not over there. And do you
Yeah.
think, like, what is that all about? I mean, I know why it is, like the food industry is controlling regulations with the government, so it's allowed here, as opposed to over there, they have the healthcare, and so it's in the government's best interest to take care of the citizens because they have universal healthcare. They don't want their people to be sick, and over here, it's not the case. But what can we do about that in our, like, as a
Uh,
citizen?
yeah. So there's a couple of things there. So a major thing is that the FDA is in charge of regulating those things, but it's also informed by those companies. So there's like this weird incestuous thing where it's like, we say you can eat it because we've proven ourselves that it's just a little bit much. But the major way of thinking about it is that the EU allows stuff that is proven safe, whereas the US bans stuff that's proven harmful. Does that make sense? I mean, it sounds kind of the same, but it is different because it's like guilty until proven innocent versus innocent until proven guilty, if that makes sense. So the bar is a little bit higher because in the EU you have to prove that it's 1,000% safe. Whereas here, it's like you have to prove that it's actually harmful. So there's a lot of stuff in the middle that's kind of like, what? And that we allow in our food. Whereas in the EU, they're like, nope, show me the receipts that it's fine. Show me the receipts that it's. So I think that's a major reason why you have things that are allowed here and not allowed there. Um, that being said, if you want to avoid those things, right? The first thing I would say too, and this kind of goes back to the kind of hierarchy of evidence type of thing that I was talking about before, is that um, one of my pet peeves is that when people are saying things like, oh, well, if you can't pronounce it, why is it in our food and you shouldn't eat it and stuff like that. And I get that 1,000%, right? Like we're having this conversation now. Um, but there's a lot of people that can't pronounce quinoa, right? So it's just because it's an ingredient that you don't know about doesn't necessarily mean that it is harmful. And just because again, they have to prove that it's safe over there. So there's a lot of things that are probably not harmful that they have banned, right? So just allow room for that a little bit, because I don't want people to get so in the weeds about all the ingredients that are in our food, and then that prevents them from taking action. I don't want people to get bogged down by too much minutia, so that like the major thing is eat more wholesome, unprocessed, minimally processed foods, and you can have some foods that are like a little bit more processed here and there as a snack, or complementing your food. If it's something that is ultra processed that's going to help you eat way more unprocessed foods, go ahead, right? A great example of that is salad dressing. There are some salad dressings that are like the paragraphs of ingredients that are on that, it's like they have to put 0.3 font because it's just so much that's in there, and it's just a
Yeah.
salad dressing. But if that's going to make you eat a salad, if that's going to make you eat your greens, right, and your tomatoes and your carrots and whatever else you're putting in it, oh my gosh, please put the salad dressing on, right? Like don't pour the whole thing, but please pour that on, because otherwise, if you don't use that super processed thing, then you're not going to be eating the unprocessed foods, right? So it's kind of this cost benefit thing. And I don't want people to feel like, oh, well, it has this like carrageenan, or it has this like super thing that I can't pronounce, therefore I can't eat it. Oh, and I'm not going to eat my salad, or I'm not going to eat my broccoli, or whatever it is, because I can't put my cheese on it, right? So I don't know. It's some of it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, just reduce those things. Now, if you do want to eliminate those things, right, and there could be various reasons why you would want to, there are a couple of pro tips here. One, I would say, get familiar with certain brands or certain stores or places that you can go to find those things, or to find alternatives to things that you already like. That's number one. Number two, you can start just making snacks in your kitchen. This would be number one for me, but it's number two because not a lot of people like really to cook, or to be like, chefing it up in the kitchen with snacks, right? When you can just get something for $2.99. But if that's you, learn how to make chips, learn how to make dips that you enjoy, right? Hummus is it's like the gateway drug, right, to health. So if you could learn how to make hummus, or mayonnaise even, or like your own salad dressings, learn how to make those things, and that's going to help you reduce um, the different ingredients that you're not comfortable with in your diet. It's going to just accidentally reduce things like added sugars, added oils, right? If you're also trying to reduce your calorie content, it can help you reduce sodium, things like that. So, try making your own stuff, or getting comfortable with like finding products that have way less of those things. pro hack is there's a lot of um, food labeled vegan that because they know that vegans are have that stereotype of like trying to be like the super healthiest or whatever, they'll try to make sure they'll try more than other brands to make sure that there's more wholesome ingredients in there. So sometimes if you see that label, that could be a signal that there's less like weird additives and stuff to it. Like I saw some gummy candies. I'm not a gummy person, but I did see one that here that had food coloring instead of the different food dyes that are in there. So that could be an alternative too.
Okay, Taylor V said our food is harming us. So are there any ingredients that we should like avoid at all costs? When I was younger, I did some research. I watched like all the documentaries, like the Super Size Me kind of documentaries, and they were saying like if you could cut out partially hydrogenated oil or like fully hydrogenated oil, anything that has that, if you could cut that, that's like it
Mhm.
is like a major one because it's trans fat and your body can't process it the
Mhm.
way that it processes natural fat, and it's like on the top for unhealthy ingredients because it's
Yes.
man-made.
Yeah. Yeah, so the great news is that trans fats were banned as an additive to food in the US, right? So, because that was proven unsafe, right? So they took those out. They trans fats are in trace amounts in meat, right? So if you're eating meat, you're getting a little bit of those anyway, but not to like a super harmful level. You want to make sure that you're eating again y- if you are an omnivore and you're a meat eater, you want to try to prioritize unprocessed or minimally processed meats. Um, or I should say minimally processed because they're all going to be some level of processed for sure by the time it gets to you, unless if you're going to like a farmer's market or something like that where it's kind of farm to table type of thing. So yeah, so that's going to be super helpful. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, reducing those kind of hydrogenated oils and stuff like that is definitely going to be helpful. Trans fats, again, you don't have to worry too much about it because it's been um, banned and eliminated as a food additive in the States. Um, but yeah, hydrogenated oils, things like that, you could reduce those. There's no, besides trans fats, there's nothing that I would say you should avoid at all costs if it's edible. There's stuff that I would say can be reduced greatly, right? Soda is one of them. There's so many alternatives now that have way less sugar um, and way less, of those like scary food additives that were kind of like, what exactly does this do? Um, so try one of those. Obviously within your budget, within what your taste buds tell you is an enjoyable thing to have, but those can be reduced. There's nothing else that I would say needs to be eliminated 1,000% from everyone's diet.
What about monosodium glutamate? That's a flavor enhancer. Is that what it is? Okay, because
Yeah,
I see it
it's a
in.
different version of salt.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's just a different version of salt. Yeah, it was really like they had a bad PR campaign in the 90s and early 2000s. Honestly, this is a hot take. All right. This is coming from me. This is not sponsored by this chat. But I think part of that was a little bit of prejudice against Asians and Asian restaurants because they use that as a flavor enhancer to increase the savoriness and umaminess of the food. And it's just an ingredient that is readily available, that's used a lot. I think the PR was so bad for MSG that you'll see a lot of, Chinese restaurants, for example, that will advertise, we don't use MSG because it was so bad. But again, this is just me. It's not something I've, extensively researched, but I feel like there was a lot of twinge of anti-Asian racism along with that that ingredient. But it has not been proven to be harmful. It's salt. It's basically a different, molecular makeup of salt. So it's
Okay.
it's it's fine. Now, salt has its own issues, right? So, if you're someone who is hypertensive, you have high blood pressure, this, that, and the third, and also it's usually in food that you want to minimize anyway, like fried food and, that sort of stuff. So it might be useful to reduce foods that shows up in, but as an ingredient, you know, don't go overboard, but it's fine.
Okay. So Taylor B says, if nature don't make it, don't take it. It's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
what?
yes, you're going to be real hungry. You're going to be real hungry because even the vegetables that we have, most of them have been cultivated from our taste. Broccoli, uh, uh, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale, these are all basically the same species that we have cultivated for it to appear differently, right? For it to have different attributes, like, okay, we want this gene expression to make it more leafy. Okay, you get kale. We want the sprouts to be more whatever, we get that. So most of our food has been manipulated by humans, has been modified by humans to make it. It doesn't necessarily make it bad in itself. Um, I mean, generally, yes, like as a general rule of thumb, like, if it's minimally processed or unprocessed, if it's a fruit, if it's a vegetable, it's great. If it is a minimally processed animal product, it's great. If it is going to assist you in getting more protein in your diet, it's great. But yeah.
Okay. What about like getting your vitamins from pills, multivitamins versus from the actual food? Because I've read, I think that the body doesn't absorb the pills in the vitamins and it just comes out in your urine anyway. And so you're like wasting your time. So what is that?
Yeah, it depends. It depends because you'll see some pills with like 3,000% of vitamin C. It's like you need 100, so calm down. It's like, so then you would be peeing out any excess, right? But vitamins are supplements, right? Vitamins are a type of supplement. The word supplement should tell you what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to supplement your diet, right? Um, Supplements work, right? That's why they're there. Supplements work. I mean, that being said, there's a lot of kind of like snake oil salesman stuff going on in the supplement industry, and in the US it's extremely unregulated. So if something's not a vitamin or a mineral, think twice about, like really really delve into the literature on that. Try to look at meta-analyses, like I think I was mentioning that before. Try to look at meta-analyses to see if this supplement is actually doing something or if you're just going to pee it out, right? um, Another thing to think about with vitamins is like if it's vitamin A, D, E, or K, those are fat soluble vitamins, right? So you want to make sure that you're having an adequate amount of fat in your diet, right? Like don't eliminate fat from your diet because you want to be able to absorb those. But they also kind of build up and stay in your body, right? The fat soluble ones. So you don't want to have like a wild amount of them because, it may be hard for your body to process. It may be at toxic levels. So there's no need to get a supplement that has a bajillion grams of vitamin E or something, right? Or milligrams, I should say, of vitamin E. With the water soluble vitamins, they are able to kind of excrete from your body very easily with a lot of water. If you're drinking too much water, right, that might be a thing where you're just flushing out too many of the vitamins that you need or electrolytes, things like that you need. Um, I would say there are very few supplements that I would like 1,000% recommend to everybody. Um, they should be supplementing your diet. So you want to make sure that you have a wide range of food, right? This is where the whole eat the rainbow thing comes from, to help you make sure that you're getting everything that you need. Um, I'm a vegan, right? Which means that I don't use animal products, and that also means that I don't eat animal products. Um, the thing with animal products is it can be a really efficient way to get in calories. It could be a really efficient way to get in certain nutrients, right? The most obvious one is protein, but also B12, iron, zinc, omega 3s, right? Everyone knows that fish has a good amount of omega 3s. So for me, right, I want to make sure that I'm getting those things in, right? So I supplement with protein. I mean, first, I make sure that all of my meals have a good lean source of protein when I can, right? And when I'm lacking, I make sure to have a protein supplement, right? So that's most often a protein shake. Um, Iron, zinc, omegas, things like that. Actually, I have a bit of show and tell for you. This is well, I shouldn't be showing the brand really, but you can see here. I don't know if let me try to see if
Yeah,
you
omega-3,
you
vitamin
see.
B12.
Yeah, and this one happens to be specific to vegans, right? So, for example, me, because I eat a wide variety of plants, I know I don't need fiber. I know I don't need folate, right? Like, but this one, for example, it will help me with certain things. So you'll find that some multivitamins say, oh, for a specific population, like for women, so that could be helpful there. For older individuals, and for vegans, obviously, I recommend B12, right? Not this brand necessarily, just a B12. You can take it as a pill. You can take it as like droplets. I haven't used this in a while because my multivitamin has B12 in it, but it has a little dropper in it, so that's easier if you're not a pill person. And you can also go to your doctor. Um, I saw at like a clinic by me that they were just handing out B12 shots, so that's great too. Vitamin D3 is an important one. Omega 3, right? Make sure that it has EPA and DHA in it. And then another one that I use in particular, and this is, for everyone, is potassium, um, especially if you have, I mean, talk to your doctor about this, right? But in my learning, I realize that potassium is very important. Most of us don't get enough potassium. It helps regulate the amount of sodium, right, that we're taking in, so it can help with your blood pressure and things like that. So something like a sodium salt. This isn't really a supplement, but instead of using salt, you can use some of this. There's many different brands. This just happens to be the one that I picked up. Um, and so yeah, so supplements do work, pills do work. You want to make sure that it's not, some bogus concoction that someone's making up just to sell it to people who want to affect some specific change. Creatine is another one that's really great. It is one of the oldest studied supplements, so it is absolutely 1,000% safe. You'll see a lot of like bodybuilders and gym folks using it. It helps you retain your muscles and make your muscles be fuller, and not in like a weird, like, what is that? Like, why are you doing that? It's, it kind of adds water to the muscles and helps them. Yeah, there's a lot of things, and there's also more benefits coming out about creatine. So that's one for cognitive benefits and stuff. So that's another one. Um, that's not a recommendation for all people, but getting a good backup multivitamin is great. Once you have your blood work from your doctor, from your annual physical or whatever, you can discuss that with your doctor to see if any of those are important for you. Talk about your diet. But the main thing is that they are supplements. You want to eat a good amount of food, to make sure that you're getting everything you need, a good variety of food. And if you need supplements, go ahead and do that. go ahead and do that. There's nothing like unnatural or impure about it. Like who cares? We're under fluorescent lights, wearing polyester, and we're on a laptop with, our eyes are getting irradiated. Like it's fine to get a pill. So please, I encourage you to do that.
Okay, so what about alcohol in the diet? Is that something? Because red wine is supposed to have health benefits, and then there are cultures like the French culture, the Italian culture, the whole European culture, Portuguese, the Spanish. They drink wine, sangria, all the time, and it's a higher alcohol volume than the ones we have here for their wine. They have some strong Chianti is champagne, and they seem fine. So how does that affect
Well,
the diet?
at first, let me go get this plane ticket to get over there. Yeah, alcohol is one of those things that should be just in moderation. Um, because it is like technically it is a toxin, right? Like whatever. But things like wine can also be health promoting for the other things that are in that beverage, right? So you have what is it? I'm going to go ahead and forget the compound that's in it, but it was all
Antioxidants.
over the news in the early 2000s about, oh, it's great for your heart health and da, 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 da. So it does have some like Brent or whatever. It has some good compounds that can, if they're not beneficial, they're at least not harmful.
Mhm.
Let's put it that way. You can also get those by eating the rainbow, right? By eating grapes, for example, Um, but the more important thing with alcohol is that you don't want to go overboard. Um, if you have, like, I think the recommendation is no more than one or two drinks a week. And when they say one or two drinks, they're talking about like an 8-ounce situation, not like fill the entire glass. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life and your lifestyle and how to have fun, but I can say that the general recommendation is to have less alcohol, and definitely not, binge drinking, chugging back 10 beers and that sort of stuff. The other issue with alcohol is that, and folks either don't know or forget that alcohol is a macronutrient. When we talk about macronutrients, we're often talking about fat, uh, carbs, and protein. But we also can get energy from alcohol. And it's interesting in that you don't need insulin to process it. And also, your liver will prioritize getting rid of the alcohol and using up the alcohol before any of your other, like, carbs or anything else that you're eating. Um, that's just fun info. Do with that as you will. But but the thing is that it's you can get calories from it, right? And so if you're over drinking, or if you're drinking a lot of it, you're also drinking in a lot of calories as well, right? um and not only that, right, the calories from the alcoholic beverage, or sorry, the calories from the alcohol itself, but also the alcohol is usually in like a very sugary drink, right? The way we drink in America, it's like margaritas and all these different cocktails. So that has alcohol and a whole bunch of sugar in it. So the drink is giving you a lot of just liquid calories that are easy to knock back. And then on top of that, the effect of the alcohol is that sometimes it may influence you to eat more, right?
Mhm.
So if you're chronically drinking, it's going to be influencing the overall energy density of your diet. And so that can lead you to weight gain and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel might be good for women to know about their overall health and diet?
Yes. So I would say the most important thing, this is something that I talk about on my channel a lot, is planning your meals and planning your activity. Um, I talked at length about, planning your diet as a whole, things to include more of, things to kind of reduce. But I didn't talk about exercise and how critical and important that is. Um, it's so important, especially our population, Black women. We are predisposed. We talked about this earlier, so I'll use air quotes here. We tend to have higher rates of diabetes. We tend to have higher rates of high blood pressure. We tend to have higher rates of obesity and things like that, in comparison to our counterparts and other genders. So exercise can really, really help with that. Specifically, how? With things like diabetes, you want to reduce your blood sugar. And how do you do that? You can do that by, um, reducing the added sugar in your diet, reducing the overall calories, right? That to help you lose fat. And you can make your cells, right, your body more sensitive to insulin by exercising, right, and increasing your muscle mass. The more muscle you have, the thing that I like to say is that more muscle is better metabolism, right? Muscle and metabolism. I want people to kind of like pair those things together, because it increases your insulin sensitivity and it reduces your blood glucose, because your body is it has a place for all of that sugar to go, and it increases the sensitivity to insulin. So I always recommend women to start resistance training, um, and trying to gain more muscle. I'm not saying you have to look, super bulky. You're not stepping onto a bodybuilding stage. Um, because of our kind of hormone levels and how we're set up as women, it's not something to be worried about at all, really. I mean, unless if you're, taking in some bodybuilding supplements, let's call them, then you don't, that's not something to worry about. So I would really, really, really encourage folks to do that. And in fact, I have something to offer your viewers. I have a 4-week muscle building program, specifically for women who are 35 and over, who haven't exercised before seriously, or haven't or are returning to exercise. It's completely free, and I just want more of us to be gaining more muscle for our longevity, because it's so, so, so vitally important. And it has all these other effects, right? It can affect your appetite and how that's presenting in what you're eating. It can affect your I mean, it will definitely obviously affect your physical abilities, right? You'll become more capable. For me at least, it affected my self-esteem, right? I felt more capable, I felt more present in my body. And yeah, it's just a great thing. So, and it helps you utilize the food that you're eating more efficiently and better. So even if it takes you a while to make some of the massive nutrition changes that you want over time, right? And you're just doing a little bit at a time. If you add in exercise, it's going to like completely revolutionize your body and your mind. And so, yeah, so I'm offering that to help folks get started. It's a 4-week muscle building program. So it has all the workouts there. And it also has a worksheet component where you're tracking your workouts and your activity. And it has some journaling so that you can kind of write it out, talk out how you're feeling and your progress over time. So
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for being on the channel. And for anybody who is watching, you are at the Plant Plan. So be sure to subscribe to Lindsay over there. And yeah, we'll have to have you back maybe next year for the follow up on exercise and strength training. Because, yeah, this conversation just dominated with nutrition.
yeah. Yeah, they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand.
They do. Okay. So until next time,